So every exercise typically has a portion of the lift where we are at our weakest, where it's the most difficult to perform. And if we can get strong there, we can become absolutely elite at that exercise. So how do we get there? In searching for that answer, you might stumble across Charles Poliquin. Poliquin is a former Olympic coach who coached many athletes to Olympic gold medals. Now his answer was something called isometronics. That sounds very confusing, but it's just a combination of techniques. So one, it's isometrics. This is trying to move when you can't move. So trying to push against something and you just get a squeeze, but you don't actually get any motion occurring. The others are isotonic, which just mean motion is occurring. So if we look at something like a bicep curl, this is something that Poliquin is a huge fan of, and he was a fan of a bunch of different types of bicep curls to target different areas, different ranges more specifically. But it's not just let's use a different exercise in his approach, it's let's use these isometronics, so let's combine techniques. So he would go into something like a squat rack. I know bicep curls in a squat rack is typically like a sin, but he would put pins in place. So let's say we were working at the mid-range, doing a barbell bicep curl. He would put pins in place sort of at the top and bottom end of middle range, so that when you lifted to middle range, you could push against the pins. Now you wouldn't be able to move at that point, you'd be trying to push through the pins, but be stuck. So that's the isometric portion of the lift. Then you would lower down and raise back up to the pins, again, try and break through. That's the combination of the isotonic and isometric techniques. Now what he would recommend is that we would do that for the low range, the mid range, and the high range. And also combine the specific exercise that makes that range more difficult. So for example, in a normal bicep curl, the top range, the high range, isn't very hard. The distance of the weight from the fulcrum, being your elbow, is essentially nothing, right? You can't get that good of a squeeze, that good of an exercise really at that point. So maybe someone would do something like a preacher curl or whatever, just make it a little harder, or some other variation. So you do that plus the pins to get like an excellent squeeze. Now what this should do is should allow someone to be strong in the whole range of a lift. And on that same topic of being strong everywhere, he had some interesting points around abdominal training. Now, what he was arguing is that because athletes are often in extended positions with their spines, we want to train that position. We want to bulletproof that position. Now, that makes a lot of sense to me, but it also sort of conflicts with something in me, which is Dr. Stuart McGill, who's a world-renowned spine biomechanist, really incredible clinician, also had crazy success rates where no one else basically did. And his is the opposite approach to that. It's lessening spine motion, it's core stability. Now he's not opposed to spine motion, but it's just definitely not a starting point and something to be very cautious on from his perspective. But hypothetically, if we could stabilize the spine and then maybe get to this point where we can train in an extended position, it does make a lot of sense to me, be it in everyday life or in athletic endeavors, that we want to be strong in these odd positions because we might end up there at some point. I think that's giving me a bit of guidance around where I want to sort of direct my own training. Now, this might seem unrelated, but I do actually think it ties in quite well. So Poliquin also raised some ideas around supplementation for focus and concentration. Now, why do we need to concentrate? Well, because building muscle patterns is actually quite difficult. It requires a lot of focus. If we're distracted, even something that someone like McGill would talk about is having music on when we're trying to learn a new motor pattern is a bad idea, basically. Like, you're going to distract yourself from something that requires intense focus. So what Poliquin recommended was a combination of ginkgo biloba and DMEA. Now, I have no idea what these are, but he's arguing that they are helpful for concentration. So I think that's something that might be worth a deeper dive on myself. Just to see if that would be a way that I could actually improve some motor patterns and motor recruitment, because I think that would be really helpful. And for anybody unaware who's watching this, I've learned this and much more as a part of my 50 Days to Rebuild challenge, where I read 50 pages of a physio or exercise book and do 50 minutes of exercise in a day in an attempt to rehab myself. Moving on to the exercise portion of things, I've really been trying to focus on building up my base, so I mean that quite literally, so my feet. Something that I noticed was that when I was doing certain exercises, like trying to practice a hinge, which is really important for like a squat or a deadlift, I was collapsing into my lateral feet. So I've really been trying to fix this with these, I'm sort of seated doing these little rock overs. I found this on some video online, it was really good. So I'm sort of trying to strengthen my lower foot so that I can balance between the sort of mid and lateral foot and have that more stable arch. Now, A, that's going really well, which I'm super happy about. And B, something that's really cool is I'm trying to apply that same concept to these other exercises that I'm working on. And it's actually working. So the best thing I can see this in is I'm trying to apply this like a calf raise, it's more stability, also like a lunge. And when I'm doing the lunge, I can sort of see my foot when I'm like watching the footage back, and can feel it to some extent, is collapsing, like the lateral foot. And when I really focus on trying to keep it in, it's like, oh, that's like connected through the ground. Like I have like a chain of activation. It's not this like weakened compensation sort of collapsing into angles and putting load on ligaments that it shouldn't be. So that's really cool. The other way that I feel it is in monster walks. So I do these as a part of the McGill method to activate my glute medius. So really important for core stability. But again, feeling that activation from the foot all the way up the leg into the hip, really cool to feel that. So I'm really glad with how that's going. The only other thing that I really want to cover on the exercise portion of things is the bird dog. So again, this is part of the McGill Big 3. It's something that I've been doing for a long time. Previously, I was doing it on my fist, and I recently swapped to my palm because I was hyperextending at my elbows, and I found this change was helpful. But the issue is I was initially on my fist because of wrist pain, and this has already started to return. So I've tried doing some sort of like wrist like presses and sort of rocking onto it, some joint mobilizations. It always kind of feels okay doing that stuff. Like I've done a lot of this wrist work before, but it's never quite enough, which is why I ended up with these sort of like modifications of being on my fist in the first place. So it's making me think like perhaps it's not even just a wrist issue explicitly, it's just sort of presenting there. But it is also providing a bit of a point of confusion for what to do next, because I really need to bird dog, but I don't want to hurt my elbows or my wrists. But yeah, that about wraps it up for everything today. I've just finished the Poliquin principles, so I'll be on to Brian Mulligan's work, who's like a seminal figure in physiotherapy, so I'm pretty excited for that. And yeah, that's it for day 34. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.